Good day. Welcome to the session on unlocking value in data with Amazon SageMaker. My name is Clinton Thomson and I am the CTO of TechConnect IT Solutions. TechConnect IT Solutions is an Amazon Web Services advanced consulting partner, and we work with independent software vendors such as Datarwe to deliver robust and secure cloud solutions. I'll be joined today by Dr. Meghan McConnell, a data scientist at Datarwe, and she'll represent some of the work she has been doing with her team, Dr. Tina Nguyen and Joe Burton. Today we'll kick off with an introduction by myself, and then Meghan's going to take us through some of the challenges, talk about data labeling, look at data visualization and cleansing of data, and at the end of the session she'll tie it back to the value they get as a business, as well as how other business can materialize value from their data. In early 2017, TechConnect was introduced to two remarkable individuals, Dr. Calvin Ross, a technologist and entrepreneur, and Dr. Brent Richards, the Medical Director of Innovation and Director of Critical Care Research at the Gold Coast University Hospital. Our discussions were largely around the gold standard ICU dataset for research, called MIMIC, provided out of the US, that contains 60,000 anonymized patient records, with a fairly shallow dataset, being the patient records and doses, as well as other data such as low frequency data from ICU, aggregated down to 15-minute intervals. Researchers were able to show that even with the 15-minute aggregated data, that they could predict early onset of conditions such as septic shock within ICU patients. Their vision, however, was to look at how much deeper we could go. Looking at the device on screen here, the General Electric CareScape bedside monitor, this device produces 240 Hz of ECG signal, 240 data points per second. If researchers could produce such results with 15-minute aggregated data, what are the possibilities around having high-fidelity data, and how much more effective could we be as a medical community? So together with Amazon Web Services and federal government funding, TechConnect and Datarwe set out on proving out the capability. We set up a basic lab, as you can see there, which consisted of the General Electric CareScape bedside monitor, also the General Electric ICU gateway, and a Fluke Mark II patient simulator, which allowed us to create patient-simulated events like AFib. As we were streaming 240 Hz of data, Kinesis was a natural choice for us. And the cloud, of course, is really good at storing data and ingesting data, and keeping the compute decoupled from data, from a cost management perspective. So with the use of Kinesis and batching into S3, we were able to establish a data lake from this patient simulation. After successfully proving that the data could be ingested and stored in the cloud, as well as rehydrated and analyzed, this formed the basis of the Precision Medicine Data Platform and enabled Datarwe to proceed to Advanced Queensland funding. With the Advanced Queensland funding program, this allowed Datarwe to form partnerships with industry, such as TechConnect, as well as government institutions such as Queensland Health. After successfully getting funded and the partnerships formed, this allowed Datarwe to implement the solution within Gold Coast University Hospital in the ICU department, as well as collect medical records of patients, often referred to as the Electronic Medical Record, or EMR, not to be confused with the Elastic MapReduce. I'll now hand you over to Dr. Meghan McConnell, data scientist at Datarwe, to take you through the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and thanks so much for that introduction, Clint. My name is Meghan McConnell, and I'm a data scientist from Datarwe. To begin my presentation today, I will be focusing on some of the challenges I face as a data scientist, including how to unlock value in medical data, operating within the data science hierarchy, data preparation and enrichment, and how we tie this all together to form the Datarwe data engine. First of all, one of my main roles as a data scientist is to unlock the value in our data after it has landed in the data lake. In particular, one of my major focuses is developing reliable strategies in the field of predictive healthcare analytics. Simply put, predicting health events in ICU patients before they occur. But to get to this point, there are many steps in between. Once the data has been collected, the first major process to be undertaken is data preparation. That is, the process of transforming raw data into valuable, clean, organized, and feature-rich data. In fact, this step is so important it takes up approximately 80% of the effort required when conducting any kind of machine learning. So why does raw data need to be prepared, and how can we go about achieving this? Well, to answer this, we first need to take a look at the data science hierarchy and see how all of these pieces fit together. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have data collection. This is a major challenge for our business due to the sheer number of data sources, types, format, and volume. The digital twin shown in the previous slide represents the concept of creating a complete digital healthcare record for each and every patient that passes through the Gold Coast ICU. This digital twin is generated by combining the electronic medical records from MediVision, such as lab results, drug infusions, admission discharge status, diagnoses, nurses' notes, and the likes, with the high-frequency data streamed from the bedside monitors. Thanks to our partners at TechConnect, we are able to ingest this data, which brings us to the next level of the pyramid, the data lake. Utilizing a data ops pipeline built on an AWS and Intel stack, the ingested data from both the EMR and the IoT system is fed into an S3 data lake, predominantly in the Parquet format. The next stage of the pyramid, the data enrichment phase, is generally where data scientists like myself take over from the data engineers in order to find deeper meaning in the data, although there can still be some overlap here depending on the particulars of the task. This is the stage where our raw data is prepared for use through processes like cleaning, anomaly detection, quality assurance, annotation, and labeling. These processes are carried out using data enrichment pipelines that are built through a combination of Landibs, SageMaker, ECS container components, and Athena. We have found Athena to be an amazing big data querying workhorse as it is extremely scalable and cost-effective. As we close in on the top of the pyramid, we finally reach a point where we can begin to distribute enriched data to interested parties for further analysis, or make use of the data for our own analytical purposes. At this point, we spend the majority of our time utilizing the SageMaker notebook tools to develop visualization techniques, analytical structures, and feature engineering techniques, generally on a smaller portion of the data, before packaging these notebooks into pipeline processes for widespread application to our data lake. Now we're at the very top of the pyramid, where we reach the pinnacle of data science. This is the part where we can begin to draw conclusions and make inferences based on the analyzed data. Here, our enriched data finally becomes useful. It is at this stage that we can begin to build machine learning algorithms in order to help us in the goal of producing predictive healthcare analytics. In the remainder of this presentation, I will be focusing on the data enrichment and data analysis segments of the pyramid. In terms of Datarwe, data preparation or data enrichment is of the utmost importance. For example, one of our current projects involves streaming data straight from bedside ECG monitors. When this data first hits our servers, it's not in a particularly useful format, just a string like the one shown here in the data collection image. A Python microservice run on ECS breaks up this seemingly incomprehensible string of data into individual blocks that belong to each ECG channel, as well as pertinent information like bed, hospital, unit, and timestamp. So you see, taking something from this to the enriched data you see on the right-hand side of the slide is quite a challenging process. And although the omnidirectional pyramid shown in the previous slide was a nice representation of the path one might follow to achieve these kind of results, it should not be thought of as a single iteration process. In our Datarwe data engine, we have extended the concept of the data hierarchy from a single cycle in order to consider the enrichment process as iteratively building a label store over many cycles of annotation. Starting with raw ingested data, initial models are constructed using feature engineering and human labels. These models can in turn be used to annotate and extend the label store with human in the loop and active learning processes. A label store also contains annotations derived from multiple versions of models or model variants, which has provenance recorded in the label store as well. Effectively, we have an ensemble of annotations in the label store that we can derive highly accurate insights across the raw data. Models may be further optimized or quantized for efficient execution and validated against other model variants in the label store. Models can then be selected for deployment into production. Deployed model outputs can then be ingested back into the data engine for subsequent validation. This brings me into the next part of my presentation, data labeling. The labeling of data is not only a key component of the iterative data science process, but also a key service that Datarwe aims to provide. We have found integration of semi-automated labeling is key to building a comprehensive label store and more accurate models. We have used the SageMaker ground truth with various custom templates to integrate human labels, but we have also incorporated active learning and pre-annotation using earlier model variants. Essentially, human experts are correcting the pre-labeled annotations, which is more efficient than labeling from scratch. And active learning techniques help to identify which human validation will help the model discriminate more quickly in the future. These processes are key to the integration of clinical knowledge. It marks the collaboration between humans and machine learning to encapsulate clinical interpretation. Typically, labeling tasks require various levels of clinical skills. Some tasks are generic, such as tagging data as personal health identifiers, and is used in validating and improving our de-identification tools. ECG arrhythmia labeling requires a higher degree of clinical expertise. As such, we split the generation of training data between medical, students, and nurses, but our gold test is labeled by experienced cardiologists only. We have established a private labeling workforce, which is authenticated with Incognito. To give you a better idea on how simple it is to utilize the SageMaker Ground Truth tool, I will now conduct a short demonstration. Before the video begins, it should be noted that the job shown in this video is constructed using a custom HTML frontend built by our graphics engineer, and as such may not look similar to those generated using the inbuilt AWS template options. However, the same principles apply. A cohort of objects to be labeled are specified, the format of the required output is defined, and the group of labelers for the task are selected. This video is taken from the perspective of a prospective labeler. Here, the labeler selects the job they wish to complete from the available task list. Upon selection, a task from the cohort is initiated, and a multiple lead ECG appears, where the color denotes the pre-assigned label. The user can then elect to correct any of the segments, but this is limited to the predefined label set. The probabilities shown at the top of the screen indicate how confident the model was when generating the initial label set. We have incorporated clickbox options for our labelers to indicate how confident they were for a given task, and a comment box for specifying anything of interest about the signal selection. Once satisfied, the labeler can click Submit, which will load the next tasks from the job, and this process is repeated until all tasks have been completed. This brings me to the topic of our labeling architecture and the key principle behind it. How can we develop an architecture to experiment with various model configurations and apply the best ones to a dataset at scale? This is a complex question, one that took our company a long time to solve. It requires the data engineer to work in unison with the data scientist. Luckily for us, we have such a great team. At a glance, the workflow diagram may look quite complex, but if broken down, creates a manageable and reliable labeling architecture. On the one side, we have data scientists like myself who ingest, pre-process, and train various machine learning models, then validate their performance against a rule-based algorithm, registering the results against a particular model and train set, before evaluating against our ground truth labels, which are now in the label store, thanks to SageMaker's handy ground truth service. All of these steps are undertaken in the Kubeflow pipeline provided by our data engineer. The model is then stored in the model registry for deployment. As the data scientist, we can elect to run the model over the entire hospital record, although this is rarely taken as the first step. Or we can select a smaller subset known as a cohort and utilize a secondary inference pipeline for processing. This inference pipeline is able to ingest and reformat the relevant data specified by the elected cohort, run batch transformations, then reformat the output, the generated labels into our label store. Again, all thanks to the work of our data engineer. By operating in this way, we are able to ensure consistency in our production models by applying the models in inference pipelines before they are utilized over the entire database. Versioning is another key concept of our model structures, as it is storing the historical versions of the model. Under this provenance, any labels are able to be traced back to the exact model that produced them, along with the particular training set that produced the model. This architecture is entirely scalable, as instances can be spun up and down depending on the output requirements. This brings me to the next part of my presentation, where I'd like to discuss data visualization and how to clean your data. First of all, data preparation and enrichment leads to the ability to visualize patient healthcare statistics in a whole new way. Using SageMaker, Athena, and S3, we have developed several separate tools for querying our database in order to create graphical representations that can be utilized to visualize a patient's stay in hospital. From the shape of second-to-second waveforms, to the types of arrhythmias that may be present within their ECG, down to the specific times in which medications and IV solutions were dosed. These tools alone are extremely helpful to medical professionals and are able to be generated directly from the enriched data without any machine learning models whatsoever. I'd now like to demonstrate one of our more useful notebook tools that we have developed with medical professionals in mind. Before I begin this demonstration, I'd like to mention that in the first cell of this notebook, you might notice the PatView class that is being imported from the PV class library. These functions are not available in any public toolboxes, but rather were constructed by Datarwe for use around capturing the following visualizations from a patient's stay in ICU. After this demonstration, I will discuss these libraries to give a more complete picture on how this visualization tool was built. Once the visualization class is imported, the patient of interest is selected using their de-identified ID, and an object is generated by calling the class. Using the itemized GCUH codes, the signals of interest from the patient are specified, and the graph signal function is called to show these plots, as you're about to see. We can also use this class to report the key dates of a patient's stay in hospital, such as their admission and discharge date times, and query the given diagnosis of a patient. As you can see here, the patient was diagnosed with a subarachnoid hemorrhage, requiring surgery and a drain. We can also determine the ICU bed in which the patient stayed and zoom in on areas of interest in the signal plots from above. Here I have a small excerpt of the patient viewer class that was utilized in the previous notebook. Now, while the specific code may not be applicable to your business or model, the concept behind it is. The main features I'd like to point out is that we are utilizing Python code to query our S3 data lake with Athena queries, and plotting these results using the matplotlib library, all from within the SageMaker instance. I think it's amazing as a data scientist that we can access these Athena views of our S3 data lake, all from within this Python notebook. Data cleansing is also an integral component of data preparation and is something that should not be overlooked or underestimated in value. This broad topic can be broken down into several subcategories. Today I will focus on the main three. When addressing missing or incomplete records, we can approach the matter in a number of ways, which ultimately depends on the type of data that is missing and its value. One of the simplest approaches is to include exclusion criteria, which can be effective if the number of patients with missing data is limited. Another commonly implemented approach is interpolation and is often used when quite a few patients are missing only a small amount of data. Outliers and anomalies are another occurrence to be addressed. A key example for the healthcare data which we store using S3 has emerged around the recorded admission and discharge times for patients. Although sporadic, it was noticed that some patients seemingly had healthcare metrics being recorded before they were admitted to hospital and even after their listed time of discharge. The image in the top right-hand corner shows that the patient's stay in hospital, as indicated by the purple bar, finishes before healthcare measurements such as heart rate and oxygen levels, as indicated by the green bars in this particular example. Corrective steps have been taken to address these anomalies, such that the discharge and admission times are now aligned with the start and end of data collection. But you can't just do that straight up. We have included other measures such as ECG fingerprinting to ensure that the data collected after discharge belongs to the same patient, as does the data before admission. Source inconsistencies are quite an interesting consideration and of the utmost importance when pooling data from multiple locations. When thinking in medical terms, parameter names, IDs, and units can change and do change, not only from country to country, but even within different medical systems nationally. One simple example that springs to mind is the use of pounds or kilograms when recording a patient's weight. Perhaps a more critical example is the way in which different types of healthcare monitors and systems represent and label their data. At Datarwe, we take the approach of labeling our ECG signals with second-by-second segmentation, whereas PhysioNet, a popular online database, offers a different solution of beat-by-beat labeling. Both approaches are highly useful in their own right, but this variation in annotation formatting leads to issues when it comes to integration, particularly for that of our machine learning practices. Consequently, annotation and labeling paradigms from aggregated sources are converted to a universal format such that the data can be implemented interchangeably between our model development pipelines. And now is the time where I'd like to tie back this presentation to the value it brings to our business at Datarwe. Now, what is the value in our data and why should people care about it? Well, the value of big data in the medical industry is that it unlocks the ability to apply machine learning techniques and discover novel, significant trends that are not attainable through classical rule-based techniques. For example, one of our current projects is utilizing machine learning algorithms to predict the occurrence of atrial fibrillation in post-cardiac surgery patients. This is something that will be extremely helpful to hospitals, as about 30% of their cardiac surgeries end up with patients in AFib. Now, we also combine a database with high-frequency waveforms that have time-specific medical record data attached. Quite often you'll find ECG waveforms are available or EMR records are available, but not both together. Now, one without the other can be useful, but both together are a really powerful concept. Now, another huge concern in the medical industry is the access to data. It is one of the main reasons that medical research can be held back due to the lack of real data and the outcomes of those patients. Often, it is extremely difficult for researchers to get their hands on hospital data due to the ethical concerns around personal health information. It is an extremely time-consuming process, which we aim to dramatically speed up by being able to provide de-identified data. Not only does it decrease the hurdles one needs to overcome in order to access healthcare data from hospitals, but it increases the speed in which this can happen. Furthermore, this data is not only more accessible through Datarwe, but comes pre-labeled and cleaned using processes that incorporate subject matter experts in the loop, like cardiologists. So these labels can be trusted and the data is in a really useful format already when the researchers gain it. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why would a client be interested in cleansed and pre-labeled data? Well, by providing clean, consistently formatted and pre-labeled data, a majority of the work is already done by the point in time at which the client receives the data. As I stated earlier, an estimated 80% of the time taken generating machine learning algorithms is within the data preparation stage alone. So by providing data where this stage is already complete, the client is saving a lot of time straight up, making your business more valuable. In my experience as a data scientist, poorly labeled data trends towards poor model performance and potentially biased results. In fact, a model's performance can be drastically increased through data cleansing alone. That is, without any changes to the architecture, which saves my time and the client's. A great way to think about the value in clean data is that a model is only ever as good as the data it interprets. How can you trust the results of a model trained on a database filled with inconsistencies, anomalies, and missing values? Thanks everyone for your time.